Meanwhile, on the front lines, Russia's army is collapsing. Ukraine has begun the liberation of Donbass. The battlefield is on fire. Ukrainian heroes are crushing the enemy and driving them out of our land. Panic spreads through Russian ranks. Their elite officers are gone, their lines are breaking, and their so-called unstoppable army is running for its life. The defense forces strike with precision and fury, and fearless assaults are rewriting the course of the war. Putin's soldiers are trapped, terrified, and desperate to surrender. Every explosion brings the end of the occupiers' empire closer. The Kremlin is trembling. This is the beginning of the end. The front is burning, the enemy is falling apart, and Ukraine's unstoppable advance is turning history itself. The downfall of Russia's army begins now. Let's talk about it. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. I'm Maria Farafonova, and here are the latest news. Our defenses are performing the impossible and driving the occupiers from our land. Ukraine's general staff has reported a successful liberation operation in the Pokrovsk sector carried out by 132nd Separate Reconnaissance Battalion of the Air Assault Forces. Service members of the battalion have liberated the village of Kucherev Yar in the Pokrovsk sector. The brilliantly executed operation not only restored control over the settlement, but also resulted in a significant number of occupiers being taken prisoner.
Our state's exchange pool has been substantially replenished, with several dozen Russian prisoners.
Thanks to the paratroopers' success, Ukraine has gained an additional lever to bring home our defenders who are currently held in enemy captivity. Russian soldiers are now ready to surrender on their own. It's their only chance to survive. One Russian serviceman even described how he begged Ukraine's armed forces to take him prisoner. After seeing footage of captives taken by Bukovina paratroopers, the occupier decided that surrender was his best option.
I asked, "Are you the 82nd?" They answered, "Yes." And I shouted, "Take us prisoner." While they were leading us, tied up, I kept shouting, "Don't shoot, don't shoot." To which they replied, "We are people, not beasts. We will not kill you."
He was stunned. There was no torture, no abuse. They treated them like ordinary guys. But during transport, several Russian drones appeared overhead. They targeted the prisoners specifically to kill their own. That's when the occupier was shaken by a chilling realization.
Having thought it all through, I realized it looks like the Nazis are us.
Well, not all Russian soldiers surrender willingly like that, but that's not a big deal because our fighters have the means to force the occupiers to fall back.
We have a method, it's called Not the Argument, a backpack with 12 kilograms of explosives. You throw it into the enemy's defensive position, and the position slowly starts to blow up. And we toss 3 backpacks in there, and they realized they had to surrender.
Ukraine's defenders have struck a crushing blow against Russia's most elite units. Over 50 high-ranking officers and special operatives from the infamous Senezh and Kubinka divisions, as well as agents of the GRU and Special Operations Forces, have been wiped out in one precise strike. For Moscow, it's a disaster. Years of elite training and command experience erased in seconds. The enemy's leadership structure is collapsing, and confusion is spreading across the front lines. What really happened, and what does it mean for Russia's war machine? The full story next.
More than 3,000 kilometers. That is the current length of the front line between Ukraine and Russia. Of that, nearly 1,000 kilometers are active combat zones. Hundreds of kilometers where Ukrainian defenders break the backbone of an army that was once called the second strongest in the world every single day. And every meter of this line is a story of courage, loss, and unbreakable will. At this front, not only columns of equipment and infantry are being destroyed, but also Russia's military elite. During the full-scale invasion, Ukrainian fighters have eliminated dozens of special forces operatives from the elite Senezh and Kubinka units, those whom even in Russia itself are called the elite of the elite.
Losses of such fighters are especially painful for Russia. Each of them is not an ordinary soldier, but a specialist who has undergone years of training. Training a single officer like this takes years and requires significant resources, as noted by I Want to Live.
Recently, a documentary film was released to the public about the elimination of a sabotage and reconnaissance group from the Senezh Special Operations Center, which was operating in the Chernihiv region. This operation became one of the most successful since the beginning of the full-scale war. Ukrainian intelligence officers from the 54th Separate Reconnaissance Battalion, together with border guards from the 105th Detachment named after Prince Volodymyr the Great, eliminated 6 enemy officers. The bodies of those killed, as well as weapons and equipment, were captured.
Senezh is in operation. They enter Ukrainian territory with GoPro cameras turned on, and they record all their actions, if you can even call it work. Murder, sabotage, this is essentially terror, and they are the first to show it to their, perhaps, commanders or superiors to report back. That's the first thing. And secondly, they post all of this online to intimidate people. There are videos titled, "How I Spent This Summer," And in these videos, there are actual montages. The killing of Ukrainians, both Ukrainian soldiers and Ukrainian civilians.
The Sines and Kubinka centers are key units of the Russian Federation's Special Operations Forces, reporting directly to the General Staff. Only the best of the best are selected there, those who are meant to carry out the most complex, covert, and dangerous missions. They are trained using Western methods and deployed in operations outside the country, from Ukraine to Africa. But in Ukraine, even such an elite force proved powerless. Those whom Moscow calls invisible fighters become visible on Ukrainian fields.
Stop. Come here! I've got it! Holding. Get out. 134.
According to the I Want to Live project, during the war, Ukraine has eliminated at least 58 fighters from the Russian Special Operations Forces of the GRU and FSB. For the enemy's army, these are not just losses. It's a blow to the core personnel, to those who were supposed to conduct reconnaissance, coordinate operations, and prepare new sabotage missions. And while Russian propaganda keeps talking about precision weaponry and the professionalism of the army, the reality is completely different. Across more than 3,000 kilometers of front, Ukraine is not only holding the line but is also methodically eliminating those whom the Kremlin considers untouchable. And no matter how long Russia wages this aggression, the defense forces will always give the same answer. No invader will leave Ukrainian soil alive.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
The tempo of the war has shifted dramatically in mere hours. Intense battles, relentless drone assaults, and powerful counterstrikes are reshaping the entire front line. As Ukraine's forces hold firm and advance, the world witnesses a pivotal moment unfolding before its eyes. What's happening on the battlefield right now, and why it could change everything, coming up next.
Russian mechanized assaults are suffering a complete collapse. Equipment is burning on all fronts, and the occupiers are being transferred to motorcycles. Ukrainian armed forces strikes on Russian rear positions are crippling Putin's economy, and Russian citizens are now openly calling for a strike on the Kremlin.
The Kremlin isn't here, damn it. You need to hit the Kremlin, idiots. You got the coordinates mixed up.
Zaporizhzhia is under threat. What all military analysts have been talking about has begun. And also Pokrovsk, a thorn in the Kremlin side, continues to hold out, drawing Russian reserves and preventing Moscow from gaining a strategic advantage along the entire front line. Russia is trying to take advantage of the last weeks of good weather to advance as much as possible on the front. This is exactly why the enemy suffered record losses of heavy equipment in October compared to the entire year of 2025. Just in the past 24 hours, 2 tanks and more than a dozen armored fighting vehicles were destroyed.
With small assault infantry groups, it is theoretically possible to advance, but certainly not to any significant depth. This may indicate that right now there is an attempt at a mechanized offensive aimed at breaking through the front line across a width of at least 6 to 8 kilometers, the very thing described in military textbooks and combat regulations, and to advance at least several dozen kilometers. Heavy equipment is being used for this purpose.
The most well-prepared assault units, both in terms of equipment and personnel, are traditionally concentrated in the Pokrovsk direction. However, round-the-clock attacks are not bringing the occupiers the desired results.
As of today, it is clear that despite the enemy's superior forces on all fronts, including the Pokrovsk direction, which remains truly the hottest spot and where the Russian army is attacking the most, we can say that such frontal actions by the Russians are unlikely to be repeated today, because it is obvious that the 51st Combined Arms Army, which is attacking in this direction, has plenty of other problems to deal with.
And the main one is the encirclement of Russian troops near Dobropilya. For about a month now, Moscow has been trying to send in reserves there, which significantly disperses the efforts of the Russian group. As a result, all that has been achieved regarding Pokrovsk is the presence of small sabotage and reconnaissance groups on the outskirts of the city.
Indeed, counter-sabotage operations are very active today. Accordingly, the main task for the defense forces is to drive the Russians out of the urban buildings as much as possible, because engaging in urban combat is the Russians' objective at this stage, to gain a foothold in the city so that they can then wait for reinforcements from other forces.
At the same time, it seems that another hotspot may become the Zaporizhzhia direction. After Pokrovsk, this is the second place where the Russians are trying to break through with large mechanized columns. However, they are also failing to achieve any results here. The situation has reached the point where even the ZID military bloggers, who usually praise every wise decision of the command, have been forced to change their rhetoric.
The enemy can easily send 30 FPV drones against a single tank. Accordingly, no tank can withstand 30 FPV drones. That's the whole point. It's utterly insignificant peanuts. Go to hell. Frankly, all you so-called experts who keep pushing for more recruitment just to send people to be wiped out in columns.
However, in the high offices of the occupiers, they stopped counting losses a long time ago. The main thing is to ensure progress at any cost, and where there is none, at least to show the necessary drive.
I believe it is extremely important for the enemy to get as close as possible to the regional center of Zaporizhzhia. Control over this settlement would not only allow Vladimir Putin to claim that he controls the entire Zaporizhzhia region, but also seriously damage the infrastructure, primarily the industry of this regional center. In the south of the Zaporizhzhia region, there is quite a large distance between settlements. This means that the enemy has the opportunity to maneuver forces and resources.
At the same time, today's maneuvers are mostly aimed at controlling Ukrainian logistics. After all, a large weapons hub in the form of the regional center allows the Ukrainian armed forces to quickly deliver ammunition and reserves.
In the Poltavka-Malinovka-Uspenovka sector, Russian infantry regularly conducts assault operations, mainly using convicts and other expendables. The logistics situation is about the same as in all other directions. The Russian armed forces are trying to control all transport routes, setting up ambushes or drone checkpoints, including using optical surveillance.
However, attempts to quickly rush through the kill zone sometimes end in mishaps. For example, like this self-destruction against a disabled vehicle.
They were heading into the attack, but because of the smoke from the smoke grenades, they didn't see the disabled armored vehicle and crashed into it one after another.
At the same time, intense resistance continues in the Russian rear as well. For example, a strike by drones and Storm Shadow cruise missiles the day before appears to have permanently shut down the Bryansk chemical plant.
The results of the strike are being clarified, but according to monitoring channels, the plant has been completely destroyed. Photos of the missile tail sections scattered around the area were published in Telegram channels. The Bryansk chemical plant is an important part of the Russian military-industrial complex. At this facility, the occupiers produced gunpowder, explosives, and components for rocket fuel.
By the way, Ukrainian attacks on Russian military-industrial facilities seem to have annoyed Russians so much that they're finally starting to realize where the real source of all their problems lies.
The Kremlin isn't here, fuckers. You should be hitting the Kremlin, assholes. You got the coordinates mixed up.
And finally, a wonderful story from the SBU. After watching yet another propaganda video about Russian light aircraft intercepting drones, the security service decided to make their own video. The specialists easily copied the coordinates, and the next drone route was set to target them.
Ukraine is crushing Russia in Donbass. Total collapse underway. Ukrainian forces have smashed through enemy defenses, unleashing chaos deep behind Russian lines. Panic spreads as troops abandon their weapons and flee, while entire positions fall apart under unrelenting assault. The fighting is fierce, ruthless, and decisive, every second shaping the outcome of the war. Explosive footage reveals the carnage, burning armor, shattered fortifications, and the enemy's will to fight collapsing before our eyes. The turning point has come. The full story in our next report.
The main intelligence directorate of Ukraine is showing off its new equipment and openly announcing serious problems for the occupiers. Thus, the GUR has received several of the latest T-12 boats of Ukrainian manufacture at its disposal. These 12-meter vessels, equipped with the latest navigation and radio equipment, 2 800-horsepower engines, a speed of up to 95, and a range of up to 500 kilometers, were handed over to the military by volunteers.
Hello, everyone. Today we are handing over as many as 3 T-12 boats, which will soon be used by our fighters in the special unit. These are 12-meter boats equipped with powerful 400-horsepower engines. The boats can be used for a variety of assigned tasks. These include logistics, standard operations, assault, and evacuation tasks.
Thanks to such Ukrainian boats, scouts have managed to carry out more than one successful special operation behind enemy lines. Now the military promises there will be even more such raids. And it should be noted, for the occupiers, these are far from empty words. The enemy no longer doubts that the armed forces of Ukraine will go on the offensive. And it seems the occupiers have realized that this will happen very soon. That's why the enemy is doing everything it can to prepare to receive thousands of its wounded contract soldiers. This video was filmed deep behind enemy lines by Ukrainian partisans. A hastily constructed building in temporarily occupied Crimea is being designated as a hospital. Russia is being forced to set it up due to massive losses on the Kherson and Zaporizhzhia fronts. The influx of wounded from there has exceeded all expectations. As a result, the currently existing hospitals and field clinics simply can't cope with the demand. Construction of the Sevastopol facility began in October 2022, and it was originally scheduled for completion only at the end of 2026. Now they're trying to finish it in emergency mode. The builders are working in 3 shifts, violating all technological standards. They are cutting corners on materials and safety, which leads to constant accidents at the construction site, according to Ukrainian partisans. Distortions in the structures and problems with the foundation are already visible. However, even under such conditions, wounded Russian soldiers are immensely grateful. After all, it's much better than being finished off by your own side right on the battlefield. By the way, that's exactly what the much-vaunted Russian air defense did just recently with its own fighter jet. It may provide cover, but it doesn't actually protect. The Russians accidentally shot down their own SU-SM aircraft while intercepting yet another swarm of Ukrainian drones. Incidentally, such confusion in Russian airspace is only going to become more common in the foreseeable future. And after the military, the Kremlin's air defense will soon start accidentally shooting down its own civilian airliners as well. All thanks to Ukrainian weapons manufacturers who are constantly ramping up the production of strike UAVs and missiles. For example, the Flamingo is already being stockpiled for a large-scale strike on Russia, as announced by Ukrainian authorities in response to Putin's attacks on our energy infrastructure. So it's high time for Moscow and St. Petersburg to start preparing for blackouts.
The Flamingo can cut off electricity and water in any region of Russia. Right now, it's truly just fear, a primal fear about what might happen to them over there.
The preparatory stage for the future attack on Moscow was a nighttime raid on several Russian targets in the occupied territories. Donetsk was also under attack. There, very large and significant explosions were widely reported, most likely occurring at an ammunition depot, causing considerable concern. In addition, drones struck the village of Gvardeyskoye in occupied Crimea. An oil depot caught fire there. And it was loud even in Russia itself. In Sochi, an air raid alert was declared at night. There were explosions and air defense systems were active. The city's mayor confirmed the attack. However, he did not specify whether the Ukrainian drones hit their targets, which gives reason to believe that the Ukrainian armed forces most likely achieved their objective in Sochi. In the same way, the enemy is unable to hide from Ukrainian drones even on the front lines themselves. In the past 24 hours, the Russian army has lost at least 700 soldiers killed and wounded, as well as 5 tanks, 10 armored vehicles, 35 artillery systems, and more than 1,000 drones. Nevertheless, Putin will not give the order to retreat. On the contrary, his generals are only increasing the intensity of the so-called meat assaults on Ukrainian positions.
The tactics remain unchanged. That is, these are small assault groups. 2, 3, 5, or 7 servicemen of the Russian Federation try to break through using some tree lines, advancing toward our front line. But thanks to our aerial reconnaissance teams, we detect them in time. So even as they approach, they come under fire from artillery and collective weapon systems. These include FPV drones and Mavics with drop mechanisms. In other words, we do everything possible to prevent them from reaching our front line so they can't engage our guys in a firefight.
In the past 24 hours, there have been 187 recorded combat engagements between the Ukrainian Defense Forces and Russian troops on the front line. According to the General Staff report, the occupiers carried out up to 100 airstrikes on the positions of Ukrainian units and populated areas, dropping 206 guided bombs. In addition, they conducted 4,553 shellings, 118 of which were from multiple launch rocket systems. And here is how our defenders responded to this.
Over the past day, the aviation, missile forces, and artillery of the defense forces struck 14 areas where enemy personnel, weapons, and military equipment were concentrated, 1 UAV control point, 6 artillery systems, and 1 important facility belonging to the Russian invaders, according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine.
And here, our border guards have launched a hunt for the occupiers' vehicles and personnel in the Kursk direction. Our defenders are also harassing the enemy in the Kherson region. The pilots of the drone battalion are leveling enemy positions with their drops, destroying enemy FPV drones on standby, and burning shelters and positions of Russian troops near the second lineman. The Russians' ammunition cache was also hit, along with the personal belongings of the invaders themselves, and the enemy command post in this sector of the front.
What do you think about the latest events? Share your opinion in the comments, like the video, and stay informed about the main headlines. More to come?